East Mebon Temple, built by King Rajendravarman II. It was dedicated in 953. Here at the East Mebon Temple, we are directly north of Pre-Rup. Pre-Rup was the state temple of Rajendravarman II. We're also directly east from Phimianicus, which was the royal palace. Rajendravarman ruled from 944 to 968. We're just walking along this first tier of this temple, and we'll go and have a look at this elephant. These elephants are 2 meters tall, and they stand on the corners of the temple. I just walk very carefully around here because I'm on the edge of a very tall wall. So this is one of the statues, one of the elephant statues on the corner of the East Mebon Temple. This is the east entrance to the East Mebon Temple. We'll go in here. Inscriptions at Pre-Rup claim your Rajendravarman II as a great warrior with a body as hard as diamonds. But remember, he built that temple. There are elephants on the second tier. We'll go and have a look at those as well. Certainly, King Rajendravarman waged a lot of wars and won most of them. And he had money to build temples and to organise the religious ceremonies of the day. He built this temple in honour of his mother and father. Here's the elephant on the second tier. And you can see down here that there are a range of other buildings. Buildings with these windows here, with the columns not carved in the circles, like at Angkor Wat. East Mebon Temple is built of laterite and sandstone and bricks and stucco. When we go up there into the central tower of the temple, we'll see holes in the walls for where the stucco was attached. Here is part of entrance gates to the south. You can see an elephant in the distance there on the corner, elephant statue, and the lions. And you can see the brick towers. Okay, once again, big steps for little legs. Very impressive gateways though, and carving on the columns. It has rained the last few days here, so I have to be careful of how the water lies. Here are the 5 towers of the central section of this pyramid tower. But there are also towers along here. Many, many buildings.
One of the outer buildings, very small. Again, an open doorway facing east. Just have a look at the fine carving above the doorway. And the other thing that you'll notice with this and all the buildings up here are all of these holes. We'll talk about that in a minute. Just go around to the side and we have a fake door. So there are 3 fake doors and 1 open door facing to the east. And even when we look up to the big main towers up the top, again, the doors that you see here are fake doors. Let's go up these huge sandstone steps. At the bottom of most steps, the first step is called a moonstone. See this traditional shape, and you'll see it at most temples as you enter. So we'll head up to the top level and have a look around. Above all of the doorways is a story. This is a Hindu temple, so this is Shiva riding the bull, you can see there. And an asura standing the side of the fake doorway. And again, all of these holes suggest that this lovely big tower was adorned with some decorative stucco as well, not just the raw sandstone that you see here. The lower level, lots of outer buildings. And this top level has the 5 towers. Here is the central tower, and of course a doorway open facing east. One of the entrance towers, you can see that all of its roof is missing. Other thing to note, this is high on a hill, and the erosion must have been quite intense. And all of these beautiful decorations are actually restored decorations, with the detail on the door and above the door. If you look very closely, on either side of the door is a figure, probably an asura, carved into the man-made bricks. The fine detail on the fake door. The carving on the columns. Again, another moonstone. And another figure on the other side of the door. Building of this temple began around the same time as the building of the beautiful pink temple Banteay Sri, probably suggesting why there is so much fine decoration. Banteay Sri, the decoration is even more fine and beautiful. This small outer building has got a tiny bit of a lean on it, and you can see some cracks forming. It's starting to lean over. But behind us, here's a even better example of a building starting to collapse away. Have a look at the huge supports on the side holding this wall up. Imagine how much weight that is holding. This is the problem with these temples, is that when they start collapsing, the vegetation starts growing between the cracks. If they're not controlled, they'll form into or grow into trees, and then they'll just bust apart the temple. And that's why they have Apsara staff around cutting back the vegetation a number of times a year. Some more beautiful carving up the top in the sandstone and some laterite rocks up the top. Nothing inside these buildings, but it would have had a roof at some stage. Very solid sandstone blocks. Big ones, a very solid base for the top level. Some attempts at keeping this thing together, cracks down the side wall, very well braced on the inside. And you can see that the lintel up the top here has been cracked. Outside at level 2, you can see the elephant on the corner and the remains of the foundations of empty outer buildings all the way along here, across to the other corner with another elephant. Cambodia is a wet country, so there's lots of rain. The temples all have some structure to drain the water out. So here's a hole through one of the walls. It follows a little gutter out, and then there's a decorative piece where the water flows out the other side. We'll have a look from down below. Elephants are an important feature of this temple. They're on each of the 4 corners of 2 of the levels. So it's important to keep them and to maintain them. But they're pretty vulnerable to erosion because of all of their skinny bits, such as their tail, which they have not restored, such as their legs. And you can see that this has been packed with, looks like concrete, probably done during the French Restoration period. The legs here have been restored. The ears are pretty much intact, but the tusks and the trunk have been replaced and restored. What's good to see on these elephants is a lot of decoration still there. So the decorative chains around their neck, and with some elephants too, you will see little bells as well carved into the stone. The drainage from the temple at all levels, pretty important because of the amount of rain. So there's a hole under the wall, a channel, and it comes to a point where it flows out through a decorative mouth at the end. The lions too requiring a fair bit of restoration. We often just see around some of the temples the base with the lion's feet and nothing else attached. But they've been able to hold this fella together with concrete and reinforced with some metal above his leg. Same with the lion on this side. Lots of restoration there. One of a number of exit points for the drains, draining the water from the higher levels down below. Where the water goes to, goes into what used to be a Baray. We'll talk about that a little bit more. You see very little vandalism around the temples. You will see signs of things that have been removed in the past. They have Apsara staff here sitting at strategic locations all around the temples, and they don't allow people to be here at night times. It's to protect the site and what's within it. But very occasionally we'll see a bit of vandalism like this. It would be frowned upon. Something that's quite common across all of the temples is this design of window with the round columns. Kathy showed you some earlier on where they had the vertical straight cut columns as well, but these are the round ones, surrounded by a decent frame. And here's an example of some sitting on their base, and underneath each column is a slot. So each of these would have a slot holding them into place. They're more prone to erosion than falling out. Another water drainage outlet, possibly thinking along the same lines as the gargoyles that you see in ancient European buildings. Not sure, but it's possibly what they're like. The outer halls in a lot of the temples were either libraries or dance halls, and there were a few along at this level. East Mebon Temple is really quite big. What's interesting though is it is built on a man-made island. The island was in the middle of a Baray, a big water storage reservoir. The Baray's long gone and there's no water or moats around the temple. But as we look around level 2, the lions, and down to here, this is one of 4 landing places for the boats. So people would come into the temple via boat, one of the 4 landing stations. So centuries after the water's dried up, the landing stations are still here, but the temple itself is surrounded by quite thick jungle. We'll go down and have a bit of a look. Another impressive drainage channel going from the top level down to below. And as we said, this was once a Baray or a water storage area, so this water would have poured straight back into the Baray. But these elephants are really quite big, nearly 2 meters tall. As you can see with Kathy standing next to it, she's rather dwarfed by this fellow, but they are a beautiful structure. And hiding inside between the decoration on the elephant, we see a little gecko. He thinks we can't see him. Off he goes. So this used to just be water, but now it's quite thick jungle. As we've said, the temple was surrounded by a huge Baray water reservoir, and here is another landing station. Just see how big it is. So the boats would come up to one of 4 of these so that people could come up into the temple. But now it's just jungle. We mentioned too about statues being restored. This lion looks pretty intact. But over to my right, this is what we often see at the temples. The lion is long gone, but his feet remain. On the outside of the wall of East Mebon Temple, where we're standing would have been water, because this was built on a man-made island. This is the corner, and down to another entrance and another boat ramp down this side. One of the perks of living here long term and having a long-term temple pass is you can spend a lot more time in these temples, and instead of just going in the front and leaving from the back and seeing the main things, we've got time where we can come back again and again and walk in areas that the tourists don't normally go. So here's an example, just beautiful little bits of the temples that most people won't see. Again, this is another boat ramp entry to the temple and the outer wall of the temple. And we're heading east out towards the main front entrance and the road past the temple. We came here during the dry, and so you can imagine there was just nothing growing on the ground and no green on these bricks. So we're back at the front or eastern entrance of the eastern Mebon. Lovely big temple with nice carvings up the top. A lot of detail, beautiful big elephants to see. Lots of evidence of stucco decorations in the past. And it sort of is hard to imagine that this place was actually in the middle of a large water reservoir. Now we'll go over here and pick up our bike and brave all the vendors who will want to sell us coconut juice, scarves, postcards. You buy something. Must be a hard living for these guys, especially during low season. As you can see, very few bikes, and I don't think we've seen one other tourist on site this morning. East Mebon Temple, 10th century, well worth a visit to see the beautiful decorations up the top, evidence of stucco, some lovely big lions, and more importantly, huge elephants on the corners of each of the 2 levels.